You are listening to the Ready PDM Network.
Are you ready?
Hello, Ready Product Radio heads, and welcome to another exciting episode of Ready Product Radio. This week, we speak with Andre Boysen, Chief Identity Officer at SecureKey Technologies. Andre talks to us about why user IDs and passwords are annoying, and about how SecureKey is inventing the next level of digital identity management. This episode is sponsored by Under 10 Consulting. Get a custom product playbook designed specifically for your organization. Ready Product Principle number 26 is inspired by Andre. Ignore user rituals at your peril. User rituals are ingrained behavioral patterns. Understand and respect them. They are hard to create and even harder to change. Enjoy the show. Are you ready? Andre Boysen, welcome to Ready Product Radio. Really appreciate you taking the time here. We're in your offices at SecureKey at the corner of Yonge and York Mills, and appreciate you making the time. Why don't we start, Andre, just with you giving us an introduction of yourself and what role you play here at SecureKey.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Alan. It's really great to see you again. Andre Boysen. I'm one of the co-founders here at SecureKey. And my role here today is as Chief Identity Officer, which means I'm creating the vision and the model for what it is we do here at SecureKey, which is making online life better for all of us.
Nice. Yeah, and what the podcast is all about, Andre, is called Ready Product Radio, and it's basically trying to tell stories and give lessons that us gray bearded folks have learned over the years about mistakes to avoid, shall we say, in the product journey, things to do right, that type of thing. I think people can learn from both examples, positive and negative. So really, target audience is any product person, can be a UX person, could be an entrepreneur, could be a product manager, product marketer. So I know you and I go back, I think, over 20 years. You've been in this product game a long time. So I thought we'd talk about three topics, if that'd be okay with you, Andre. Number one, let's talk about the state of digital identity, because I'm sure it's a moving target, and that's center to what you think about on a daily basis. Then second, maybe we can talk about where it's going, what the future is, and then maybe we can just wrap up as our third topic, looking back over your long and successful career in products and in technology. Maybe you can just talk to us about some of the key learnings that you found that let's say if you were just starting out 20 years ago, and somebody pulled you aside that you wish they would have told you these 4 or 5 things or whatever. Those sound good?
Yeah, it sounds like a good discussion. Let's do it.
Good. So let's start with digital identity, and let's imagine that for some of our listeners, they might have no clue what that is. Some might think that they're experts. So why don't we start maybe just kind of define your view of digital identity and what the state of it is currently.
Sure. Well, we all know what it is because we're all dealing with it every single day. We're all trying to get accesses to web services online, and it's gotten to be complete chaos. And there's several factors in the chaos. From our user point of view, the average user today, according to the World Economic Forum, has 130 user IDs and passwords.
Wow.
130. That's your Facebook, your Twitter, your bank account, your email, and on and on. Mm-hmm. Stuff I use every day and stuff I use almost never. Mm-hmm. And so that's what it looks like from a user point of view. I have 130 of these used things. I personally, I'm not kidding, I have 300. And so 200 are mine, and I'm actually the CIO for my family, so 100 belong to my wife and kids, because they are trying to manage their online life too, and it's just too hard. So that's kind of what it looks like from a user point of view, but that's not all of the trouble. The other part of the trouble is for the web services side. And we're seeing this in the newspaper. We've all seen the newspaper, week after week, breach after breach. Large, well-run, well-respected brands getting data breaches. And the reason for this is that, what we have is these large databases of passwords, and they're really hard to manage and keep safe. And even when the company does everything right, they have good procedures and everything, what happens is users, because they have so many user IDs and passwords, have trouble. So perhaps I'm using Facebook, and I've got a password that I like to use there. It's familiar to me because I use it every day. And then I sign up for some cool new service that popped up on the net today. And so I use the same user ID and password I do with Facebook. And the challenge with that is when that new service gets hacked, Now Facebook has a risk that they did everything right, but because the user used the password in both places, they get hacked too. And so we've got this two jeopardies, one from the user side and also from the service side. On the service side, the challenges are a bit bigger. As a service delivery organization, if you want to deliver a service on the internet, you've got a duty of care to your customers. You've got to keep the data safe. Yep. And you've got the reality is that sometimes the user behavior isn't that great. And so what it's become is like we had the mortgage fiasco a few years ago. Managing personal information and user IDs and passwords has become kind of like a toxic asset, right? The more of it you have, the bigger your risk. And so this is where we are today in identity and access management. We've got to get beyond this place where we are today, where every single web service on the planet issues user IDs and passwords. That's where we are. And we can see from the user side and from the web service delivery side, that's not a great thing. And so the world has to change, and that's kind of the state of the art today. Yeah,
and I have to admit, I was holding back a smirk when you said that, Andre, because I have a kind of a pattern I use for a password, and I cycle it, I vary it very slightly, but I use that literally for everything. And then when I get one of those emails, let's say from Gmail, saying, it looks like you signed in from New Mexico yesterday, and we don't think you go to New Mexico very often, then I panic and I change it for about a week, but then later I change it back because I want my life to be simple, right? I don't have to remember, 30, 40, 100 different passwords.
So it's not that you don't care about security, Alice. Exactly. You're trying to manage with your online life the best way you know how.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you do care about security, but the challenge is you've got two evil choices on your side as a user. One, you can be compliant with the web service and make it a long, crazy password that changes every 15 seconds. The challenge is then you can't get in. Or you can make it easier for you, but then you add risk to you and to the web service because the password can be easily compromised when another site gets compromised. So that's two evils that the user has to choose between, which is a great choice.
Exactly, and I know you can get into multi-factor. I had this with my Twitter account, for example. I said, okay, I'll use their two-factor. That gets tired pretty fast because you're trying to log in. Let's say in your home office, your mobile phone is downstairs in the dining room or something, and finally you just say, I'm going to kill that. Right? It's too inconvenient to use the two factors. So talking about the current situation today, like what are people just living with this, or do you think there's some froth that's starting to boil up where people are just getting sick of all the passwords?
So you actually hit on a really important point in there, is that one of the things you talked about, we're adding friction to make web services safer. We're adding two-factor. The good news is now the crook can't get in unless they have the phone. But what the problem is we've added a burden to you, the user, and made your life harder.
Exactly.
And so one of the things I've learned in this space is one of the things that's really, really important to get right is the user ritual. So I'm going to give you some examples.
Sure.
Car keys. Forever, car keys, the way they worked is you take the keys out of your pocket and you stick it in the ignition, and that's how the car key works. And now some of the cool cars come out and you don't have to put the keys anywhere anymore. And it's broken the user ritual. I don't know how many, I don't know if I should pull my keys out anymore, and so I've lost that ritual of doing that. And so sometimes I forget my keys. And it gets kind of crazy sometimes, because sometimes my wife and I are in the car and I start driving and I get out, and then she continues to drive and I've got the key.
Ouch.
That's breaking a user ritual. The car key was really well defined. It was a ritual that everybody understood. On web services now, we're in a place where every web service is dreaming up newfangled ways to authenticate users. And the problem is it's added a lot of noise to the user. Right? Now we're telling users, no matter what the web service asks you to do, whatever crazy ritual dance they want you to do, it all makes sense. And so this creates room for the crooks to operate now, because asking you for your password, it kind of makes sense. And so you're adding noise to the user. So, the car keys is a good example of a ritual that kind of got broken. Another ritual they're trying to create is in the area of mobile payments. Mobile payments, we have all sorts of innovation happening now. Sometimes you're going to be able to tap your phone with NFC. Sometimes you show a QR code from the phone. Sometimes they want you to do a selfie, and all this noise. And what that does is it confuses the hell out of the user because they don't know what makes sense and what doesn't. The third payment ritual of what you'll be able to relate to is for cards. One of the reasons payment cards have been so successful is the user ritual for debit and credit across all the brands is exactly the same across the world. And that's why payment networks have been so successful. So focusing on the user ritual is really, really important to get that right at the outset. So that's one element of kind of thinking through how are we going to change this model and make it work. Okay, so let's bring it back to identity and access. There's two key fundamental changes I think that need to happen if we're going to move identity from where it is today. So we talked about a second ago, we have this issue. Everybody issues user IDs and passwords.
Yep.
And that creates the problem that we have too many. So one of the things that's interesting is bringing it back to payment networks is that with my Visa card or my MasterCard, I can take my Visa card from my bank here in Canada, and somebody else from Australia can get their Visa card from their local bank, and either one of us could travel to London or any other merchant on the planet and go to a merchant I've never met before, and I can buy stuff. The merchant knows they're going to get paid, and I know if the merchant overcharges me, I have recourse. So that's federation. So that's kind of cool. What it says is we have a trusted issuer, it gives the user something, and the user can go anywhere on the planet and use it. So that's what we do for payment. That's what we need to do for identity and access. So rather than every web service on the planet issuing user IDs and passwords, we're going to change to a model where the user can choose a trusted provider like their bank to provide identity and access for them, and I can use it at other destinations. We actually have one great example here in Canada that we've been involved with creating. Is called SecureKey Concierge, and it uses that exact model. Here's a great challenge. Looking at those 130 passwords, I can tell you one of the ones I use the least is my CRA password. I use it once a year, literally once a year. And so what's the chances that I remember that the next time I go back? Very, very low. So we have this velocity issue. And the challenge for the government of Canada is that in order to serve my tax information online, they actually have to have really high confidence it's me. And so the problem they've got is every time I show up, I reset my password. What do you think that does to the business confidence? It goes down. Their natural business response to low business confidence is not to serve me on the internet. Which pisses me off, and I say I'm never coming back to your stupid website again. That's kind of the dynamic they have with delivering services on the internet. So with a service like SecureKey Concierge, we solve this velocity issue. Now as a user, I can use my bank account to get in and see my tax information. The good news is I'm not going to forget my bank account login because I use it every single day. Right? And like government, banks have a very, very high business assurance requirement, which means that the level of rigor the bank applied to authenticate me is at the same level the government would like to have for their customers too.
So if I could just pause you there. So I've used that service, and it works very well because it's not just your CRA, Service Ontario. So if you're logging in to renew your plates or doing whatever you're going to do, you can use that. And I just use my TD Bank credentials, and that works very well. The other thing that I've seen, and I'd like you to comment on, is it looks like the social networks are trying to offer this same capability. So, for example, so many times when I go to a new service, they'll say, "Hey, Alan, why don't you just use your Facebook login? So you don't have to create another one." What's your perspective on those? Do you think that will continue, or do you think there's still problems with that because Facebook we don't trust, at least I don't, as much as my bank, or my government for that matter.
So what the good news is the Facebook example, like the example I talked about with our service, is it's federation in action. So you can use one credential to get to another destination. From that point of view, it's awesome. It's kind of proving the model is that's what users want. They're voting with their keyboard. Every time they go, they use the credential they've got. So that's kind of proof that this is where users want this to go. So that's good. The difference kind of comes in as the challenge is the level of rigor Facebook applies to creating a credential compared to a bank creating a credential is actually very, very different. Just to put it in real perspective, I think we'd both agree here right now, we're a long way from using Facebook to change title on a house, right?
True.
Just not fit for the purpose. To be fair to Facebook, that's not what they set out to do. But it's just not what we would expect to happen. That's those two things don't go together in the user's mind. And so what's good about Facebook is it provides a great convenience to users, and for low assurance use cases like another travel website or a new e-commerce provider that I went to, it probably works okay. But I'm probably not going to want my healthcare connected to that. I'm probably want anything attached to my money, like details about transactions I have against my house or my healthcare, that kind of stuff. Doesn't fit. And so that's where banks are better suited. And when you compare and contrast Facebook and banks when it comes to providing identity services, they're very different, right? Banks enroll their customers through a regulated process. Robots can get a Facebook account. Right? Banks have met every single one of their customers in person. Facebook's met none of their customers in person, right? Banks have a duty and a fiduciary for protecting consumer data and a privacy regime they've got to live up to. Facebook does too, but it's a much lower bar. So there's a real difference in the quality of the credential that's being used here. And so for those reasons, I think what's good is that kind of proves out the model. We do need credential federation, so that's what Facebook does, and that's what our service does. And so from that point of view, it's the same.
Yeah. So when we talk about digital identity, if we were to define it, the idea is that I should be able to tell any kind of online service, mobile app, who I am in a consistent manner. So, for example, when I'm applying for a job or applying for a line of credit, I might use something like a social insurance number, for example. So is this the idea that we want to have something that's universally federated, like you say, across both the web and mobile, or do you see maybe tranches of federation depending on whether it's a social context or a business context? If the question makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And so what I think the first point is that I do think there will be more than one model. There won't be just one.
Okay.
Like we see in the payment industry, there's lots of different payment alternatives for different types of products.
Yep.
So I think we'll see that in identity and access too. So
Okay.
I don't think we homogenize into a single thing. I don't think that happens.
Yeah.
And like the payments industry, I think we're going to see lots of choice. So I don't think we're going to compel people to get a particular branded credential. That would be a bad thing. When it comes to the credit card model, as an example, you deal with Bank 1 and I deal with Bank 2. And if Bank 2 pisses me off, I'll move on to Bank 3. And so there's lots of consumer choice about who they want to anchor their relationship with, but you and I both get to do the same things at the end of the day because the model is universal. So that portion stays the same. And so with an identity and access, users will have choice about who they choose to anchor their online life with. They have the ability to change providers if they so choose. But like credit cards, there's universal acceptance. So Visa, if you've been issued a Visa card, no matter who your bank is around the world, it will be accepted at every merchant that takes Visa. So you have universal acceptance, an acceptance mark. So identity and access will get that way too. So today I get my Visa card from a particular bank. So Bank 1 gave me my Visa card. And where was I going with that? So what's important from a user point of view is that when I go to the store, I don't see my bank's logo at the store. I just see the Visa logo at the store or the MasterCard logo at the store. And so this is going to work the same way. I will get my identity from a trusted issuer, but there'll be a trust mark, like we have Visa as a trust mark or MasterCard as a trust mark. There'll be a trust mark for the identity service. So when I see that at the destination website, I know they'll take the credential that I've signed up for, which means that I know, with my credit card, I know I can use it at this destination to get access to the stuff I want today.
Yeah. Good. So let's move on to the second piece then, Andre. So that's kind of where it is today, and you guys mentioned that service, and I've used it, and I'm sure a lot of people listening have probably used it as well. When you look at, do your market research and look in your crystal ball, down the road, where do you see this evolving to? Like, what are some of the future directions of this? Is there is it just about getting these federated services more broadly adopted by users, or is there a user education piece that needs to go on? Where do you see things going in the future here? So
one thing that's true here in Canada, the service that we've been talking about, SecureKey Concierge, today only does authentication. So what does that mean? Authentication is a very particular portion of identity and access management. Authentication says the person who showed up the first time is the person that's here now. It doesn't say this is Al, and it doesn't say this is Andre. So the service we have today is pure authentication.
Right.
The challenge we have is that there are a lot of services that consume that, but the majority can't. They need identity services to go with it. The first time they show up, they need to know Al's Al before they can consume an authentication service. So the next natural evolution for what we're doing is to add identity services to it.
Okay.
And so getting back to this user ritual thing, what's kind of important is that what you don't want to do is create something out of whole cloth that isn't in the user's mind today.
Right.
That's one thing I learned, and early on, and if we get there, I'll talk about kind of some of the learnings. But
sure,
you've got to pick things that the user cares about. And so one of the challenges we have with the existing regime with user IDs and passwords, I have 130 of these stupid things, right? And some of them I really care about, and some I don't care about at all. And the truth is, the first time I go to a website, it's like a first date. I don't know if I'm coming back. And so when I go to this web service, they're all solemn. They're like, here, I got you a gift. Here's a user ID and password. Please treat it carefully.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not sure. I might. So I don't care.
Yeah.
Maybe we develop a relationship, and then it starts to get to be important to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it starts, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And so you don't want to create a situation or a credential where the user doesn't care. Because the first time they come, they don't care, actually. With the bank, they probably do the first time, but most other services, I'm not sure I'm coming back.
Exactly.
So if we're going to build an identity service, we've got to create this out of something users care about. And that gets me to this concept of what I call motivation to recover.
Okay.
I've got 130 user IDs and passwords, and the news flash comes out. The internet's been compromised. Go change all user IDs and passwords. I'm not going to 130 websites to do this. I'll do it to maybe the 5 I care about. The other 125, I don't care.
Yep.
So we don't want to create an identity scheme that kind of works like that. We want something the user cares about. So that's motivation to recover. The user will act today to solve the problem. Okay, so what are things like that in my life? There are 3 things in my life that I care about that I will act today to solve if I don't have them.
Okay.
If I can't get into my bank account, I'm walking down there today to sort that out. If I lose my cell phone, I will be twitchy in a few minutes, and I'm going to go down there and get that back too. So that's the second thing I care about.
Yeah.
The third thing I care about is my driver's license. I can't get into the hotel tonight if I don't have that darn thing. I'm not getting on the airplane.
Yep.
Right? I can't go get a new loan. I can't get my cell phone back because I don't have my driver's license. So those are the 3 things: driver's license, cell phone, bank account.
Okay.
So the concept is that users are motivated to recover those 3 things.
All right.
What we want to build is an identity service that relies on the fact that user will act if there's a problem. So the opportunity the crook has to take advantage if I lose my stuff is very, very short.
Right.
So that's the next evolution of the service, is building an identity services that relies on those things because the user cares about them.
This episode is brought to you by Under 10 Consulting. For many organizations, it seems products get released by individual heroics. Yet most organizations need a small number of living documents, fewer than 10, to manage their products and services. Contact Under 10 for a product playbook designed specifically for your organization. Yeah, good. So, yeah, and I like your definition there too, because I've never heard it that way. That authentication is just confirming that who's logging in now was who logged in last time. It doesn't confirm that was the person that you thought it was, right? So,
right.
So yeah, I like what you're saying there. So how do you go about that? I imagine that it is like that first time when you go to open up a bank account or get a job or something. You know, the user is going to have to provide that, those credentials to you. Is that the idea that?
Well, so like user IDs and passwords, online identity stuff is like that. Every website you go to, what's your name? What's your address? When you're born? What's the name of your goldfish? What kind of car were you in the first time you made out? All these stupid questions, right? It's kind of dumb. When I do this in person, I don't have to do this. So the point is, we've got to kind of make it work more like it is in person. So today, the de facto identity document we use for all this stuff is the driver's license. And so when I want to get a new cell phone or I want to get a mortgage or anything, I present my driver's license, and my service that I'm trying to sign up for accepts that as a trustworthy document, is willing to enroll me on that basis. I need the digital equivalent of that. So that's where we need to get to.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, and I've been noticing a lot of the onboarding mechanisms for say some of these new financial services or other types of web services will say that they'll say just take a picture of your driver's license. We'll fill in all the blanks, for you. Presumably this
that's a great example.
Eliminates that. Yeah.
Yeah, so on the surface of it, it kind of seems like what happened in person. They looked at my driver's license, but the problem is that the digital shadow that casts is very, very long.
Exactly.
What you don't know is what they're doing with that photo.
Exactly.
There's one well-known brand name service that takes a picture of the driver's license and ships it to a service bureau in India that compares the selfie to the driver's license to try to figure out if it's the same.
Yeah, exactly.
And if that site gets hacked, boom, they've got everything they need to take over my identity.
Yeah.
It's a terrible model. Yeah. And this is this user ritual thing that I was talking about earlier. In person, I'm used to presenting my driver's license, and that's an okay thing. But getting people to take pictures of their driver's license and put it all over the internet, that's a bad idea. Yeah, and we want to break that habit fast.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's I think it ties back to your one of your earlier points there, Andre. That I'm seeing so many articles out there on social media about how user IDs and passwords suck. But yeah, to take one thing that sucks and replace it with something that sucks equally, then are you really progressing, or are you just changing? Yeah,
you're propagating the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So to do that, do you have to work with the issuers of the driver's licenses, or how does that work? So
what we've got to do is create a model of online trust, and so what a credit card system or a debit card system is a trust framework.
Yeah.
So all the participants understand how the model works. They know what their duties are, and they know what recourse looks like when things go wrong. Mm-hmm. So we need that equivalent for identity and access. Mm-hmm. And so the first part is actually creating the trust model, and so we're very well on the way to doing that here in Canada with what we've got with SecureKey Concierge. We've already established the model for authentication. Mm-hmm. Now we've got to build on the model to add in identity. Mm-hmm. So that's the first part, and this gets done through standards, and it's a community effort. And so in Canada we have an organization we call DIAC, which stands for the Digital Identity Authentication Council of Canada. Yeah. It's all the players who care about doing online services, so it's banks and telcos and provincial and federal governments, cities are in there, and many other players too. Mm-hmm. And we're all having a discussion about how this ought to work. Mm-hmm. So that's how we get the standards portion done. But the next piece then is the harder work, is actually making the change. Yeah. So in the 1900s, every company had its own electrical generator. They made their own hydro. Yeah. And eventually we discovered there was a real efficiency by generating hydro centrally and having everybody else consume it. Right. And trying to get everybody off their own electrical supply was a really hard problem. Mm-hmm. Now that's kind of where we are in identity and access right now. Mm-hmm. Every web service and every application has been designed to issue user IDs and passwords. Mm-hmm. And so getting them off of that it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's happening more quickly than it was, years ago, but it's still a lot of work to do to get everybody off their own generator and joining the utility, which is an identity and access grid. Yeah. Yeah, and like you say, I think we get enough of these horror stories in the news about identity theft and sites being hacked and whatnot. Then, the average consumer starts to develop an appetite for something like this, right? Users get it, and users have voted very quickly that this is what they want. Yeah. The challenge has been organizations, and it used to be identity and access management was managed by the geeks in the basement, and it's kind of changed. The sea change is actually the sea change. What I mean by that is actually this is a C-suite issue. The CEO of Target got fired because the organization did not properly manage credentials. Yeah. And so we're starting to see that managing access to customer information is of vital importance to any organization that has this data, because when you get it wrong, there's a huge consequence to your user base, which costs you a lot money-wise, and also a huge brand problem. Yeah. It may lead to regulatory issues. So now this is a C-suite issue that needs to get sorted out. Exactly, and I could see somebody, being really tempted to go back to your point about the toxic assets, to use that analogy, because I really like that. If my business really has nothing to do with identity and identity management, I'm probably perfectly willing to hand that over to somebody else, because then I've kind of taken that off of my plate, right? Is that part of what you see as well? In other words, Target is interested in selling sneakers and running shoes and whatever else it sells. It doesn't necessarily care about managing identities. So if it had a partner that it could give that to, I wouldn't see them wanting to reinvent the wheel, right? That's exactly right. So let me just bring this back to the government of Canada for a second. Sure. Prior to our service being available, the government of Canada, like every other organization, issued user IDs and passwords. Yep. And this is in the Auditor General's report for the period 2004 to 2012. They spent roughly $970 million, call it $1 billion, delivering an online service to authenticate Canadians for online services. Wow. Roughly 8 million people used the service over that time period. Mm-hmm. Okay, so $1 billion. Wow. For the subsequent period, 2012 to roughly 2018, which is the contract we have with them, there's our company and one other company like ours that are providing services to the government. Mm-hmm. Our two companies together have taken their cost down to about $150 million. Yeah, so savings of $850 million roughly by getting out of the credential issuance business for the government of Canada. And that's just for authentication. Never mind the identity costs, which is in onboarding everybody. Huge savings and efficiency if it's not a core competency. For the government of Canada, they have a really high duty of care, so they've got to make sure they get this right. Mm-hmm. And the challenge that they got is it doesn't matter, they have this duty, but the user velocity is always going to remain low. Because the government has this duty doesn't mean I'm going to show up weekly now to make their job easier. I'm still coming once a year. So their competency is not authenticating me because I never come. Contrast that with the bank. If I'm in Toronto right now and somebody uses my bank account an hour from now in Whitehorse, the bank knows, hey, that's not him. So there's a real contrast there, and so there's a real competency that can be farmed out and done more efficiently by somebody else. In the case of the government of Canada, they got a better result. Their business assurance is higher. Their costs are much, much lower, and it's much easier for the customers to come. So it's more likely more people are going to their online channel. So a huge efficiency for government of Canada doing it this way. No, that's good. That's a good use case. So before we move on, anything else to talk about? So you're talking about moving to the identity piece. So like in the future, for example, am I just going to need? What am I going to need? What am I going to present? Is it going to be in my mobile phone? Is it going to be in my head? Is it going to be in a combination? Like any ideas in terms of, let's push ourselves forward. Alan walks into the new service. What am I presenting to identify myself? So that's a really great question. So one of the things that the big change is going to happen in identity and access is federation. We've talked a lot about that. The second related thing, though, is we've got to change the user rituals. And so today the user ritual is user ID and password. And it's got all the pitfalls that we've talked about. So one is we've got to get the volume down by federating. The second thing is we've got to get it away from stupid secrets. The challenge with the current user ID password scheme is that it requires that users be smart for the security to be effective. And that's a dumb model. The challenge is that, as for the reasons we talked about, it's not that users don't care about security, it's just they've got other things to do. And you got to realize that authentication is actually a burden on the user. If I could actually have no car keys, I'd be happier with that. The only reason I have a car key is because we have to deal with the crook problem. So if I could show up on the internet without a user ID and password and they knew it was me, I'd love that idea because it reduces the burden on me. So what does that mean? What we've got to do is get beyond secrets, stupid passwords, and start anchoring the internet and stuff. What does that mean? Well, one of the clever things about bank cards is with the EMV chip that's in a bank card today, what the banks and the technology enables us to do is take all of the sophistication and stick it in the card and hide it away from the user. So now the user doesn't have to be smart to make the security model effective. What keeps the global payment system safe is three things. One, there's an EMV chip that cryptographically signed the message. Two, the person who did the transaction knew the PIN for the card. And third, and most importantly, the person who owns the card hasn't called up to say, I lost the card. That user motivation to recovery piece comes in there, right? So those three things together keep the global payment system safe, and there's trillions of these cards in service, and the model works really, really well. So what can we take from that? We've got to get the internet out of stupid secrets, passwords, and start anchoring it in stuff. So what stuff? Well, the thing that to me makes most sense is probably phones. That's the one thing that we all carry. And so, that gets to the question, well, do we still need cards? And, this is probably a point in time discussion, but I think all the cool kids like you and me are going to move all their stuff from their mobile phone and we're going to love it. But I don't think that means cards go away. This is my viewpoint on this. And one of the reasons is, one is service inclusion. We can't compel everybody to get a cell phone if they want to get serviced. Right? For people who can't afford it, that's not a great model. Which means we have to continue to issue cards for those people who can't afford the phone, who can't be one of the cool kids. Right? So that says cards continue on that minimal basis alone. The second reason is because we've got the bootstrapping issue. Okay, let's the phone is the center of my universe and everything's in my phone. I accept that as a destination. The question is, how does it happen? Okay, I got my car keys are in my phone. My hotel keys from tonight are going to be in my phone. My healthcare card's in there. My driver's license in there. My credit card, my debit card, and my loyalty card. All that stuff is in there. And I lose my phone. Now what? Please tell me I don't have to go back to all those service windows and do it all over again. So I'll never do that. It's about the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So what then instead? What I like about cards is that, one, is the users are all trained up on how to use them. All the existing business processes support them. Two, with NFC, we can do something really cool. So I'm going to tell you what the cool thing is in a second, but I just want to talk about Bluetooth for a second. One of the things that's cool about Bluetooth is I bought my phone from Apple and I bought my car from BMW, and I want to make those two things work together. I didn't have to call Apple or BMW to make that happen. I did it all myself. So I paired my phone and my car together, and I did that myself. So that's kind of cool. That's scalable because then I can pair all the stuff I want to pair and I can figure my life the way I want to and you can do the way you want to.
Yeah.
And our choices don't have to be the same. Okay. So what's cool about cards, it allows users to do that exact same thing. I can use my card now to bootstrap and create a strong credential in my phone, right? And so that's kind of cool. So now I can start loading the things in my phone that I want in there, whether it's my car keys or my credit card or my debit card, or my driver's license, any of this. I can do it myself, which means I don't have to go to a service counter. Really, really important. That makes it scalable. The user can do it themselves, and if I lose it, I can do it again, and it's not that big a burden. So that, to me, is kind of a cool model to think about. And then there was a third point I wanted to make, but it left me, so maybe it'll come back in a minute.
Well, let me try to reiterate what you said, and maybe it'll come back while I'm trying to repeat what you said. So you said the phone's the destination. We get everything loaded in there. The phone is a physical thing, therefore it's subject to being lost, left in the back of a taxi, whatever. What you're saying is, what do I do now? Well, what I heard you say is, if I have one other physical thing that is also trustworthy, like a card, then what I can do is I just get a new phone, and presumably, I know Apple has this technology, and lots of others do as well. I can disable all the stuff that's all my personal information on the phone I lost. I get a new phone. I use that other credential, that card, to bootstrap, to use your words, and then off I go again. It's an inconvenience, but it, like you say, it's a scalable model that rinse and repeat. Is that fair? Okay.
Yeah, that's really really good summary.
Okay.
And that actually helped me remind me the third point I was trying to make.
That's what I was hoping.
Okay, good. So the third point I wanted to make is the challenge we've got is that today, I'm not willing to go on a trip anywhere without my wallet, right? And, if you believe that the whole world winds up on the phone, let's just examine what happens when you've been on the phone, you playing your games on a 12-hour flight and you arrive at customs and your phone is dead and you can't present your passport now, right? Yep. Or you're at the store and your phone is dead. Well, we're going to have charging stations at the cash register now so you can charge your phone for 4 minutes before you can pay.
Yep.
Right? So these devices are a long way away from being as convenient as the card and as reliable as the card. Always works no matter what. It's got a 5-year service life. Yep. This has got an 8-hour service life roughly. My phone, right?
Yep.
And so that is one issue, and the other one gets to standards. I was on a trip recently in Chile, and I'm driving through the mountains. You're trying to tell me that I'm going to get pulled over by the police, and I expect the local Chilean police officer is going to know what my driver's license looks like on my phone, and he's going to be able to rely on it. Like, it's just, that's not going to happen while I'm in this space. That's 20 years out.
That's future stuff.
Really future stuff.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, for at least a generation, cards are going to continue to be the main business reliability mechanism, and then we'll use that to bootstrap the mobile experience.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you're right on the battery thing. Just a story in terms of my world. I take my son and I go camping every summer, and they have the washrooms there at the campsite, and then they have a little area where you can do some laundry and do some dishes. The number one use of that little area where you can do the laundry or your dishes is it's the only outlet that's free. So you see all the teenage girls in there charging their phones because it's the only place that they can do it. So true point, right? And we're seeing this issue also with the electric car. So that's good. So I want to respect your time, Andre, because it's getting late in the day. So why don't we leave that there? Third topic I wanted to cover was more of a general one. I think you and I probably met back in like 1995. When you were working at Footprint, I was working at TD Bank. We've both been in the industry a while. Any just general, high-level learnings that you can share with the audience in terms of, if you were to, let's say you're going back in time, in the DeLorean, and you're giving some advice to the 20-year younger Andre, what would be the few things that you'd say, okay, make sure you do this, make sure you don't do this, watch out for this, can you give us some of the gray hairs that you've earned over the years? Yeah,
so one that I've learned, and that's actually true in this business, actually, is the thing you start with is probably not going to be the thing that you finish with. And so we started this business thinking we were going to do NFC payments. I was going to be able to tap my credit card on my computer at home, so I didn't have to type my credit credit card number in a browser. And that's actually not turned out to be true. It's, getting to the user ritual thing, it was just too different. But what it did allow us to do is apply a lot of learning we had about how payment systems works and apply it to identity and access. And that has turned out to be a real boon to identity and access thinking. It was a very different way to think about the problem. And so being able to apply your domain knowledge in a different space actually turns out to be way more useful sometimes than the thing you started out with. So that's one kind of thing I learned from this.
Yeah, that's a good one.
A second one that I kind of thing that is interesting is you got to choose something that you're passionate about. Because if you're not willing to think about it day and night, you're never going to be successful enough to really get the insights you need to make the product get over the line. Yeah. And so that's another, you got to really care about it if you're going to spend your time on it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And so the things you care about the most, and this is usually the best source of inspirations, are the things that piss you off.
Yeah.
And so you got to, you got to interview your customers to find out the real pain that they're experiencing. Yeah. And this identity and access thing is, I was living large. Like, I just hate this user ID and password. I hate user IDs and passwords. Yeah. And so figuring out how to solve this problem using this other discipline that we'd had exposure to was really, really important. If you were going to be successful in products, one of the things that's particularly topical today, and I think is actually really true, has been a great insight in not doing product development, is having a tight iteration loop. So you got to build something and then measure how it does, then document what you learned, and then repeat and iterate. And you got to iterate fast. And so that's what Agile is about. And it's really true. Is the only way you're going to find out if your thing is any good or not is put it out in the wild and see what happens. Yeah. And listen to all the things of where it sucks, and then rather than being deflated that your thing sucks, use the message it sucks to make it better. Why does it suck? What would you expect to be different is the opportunity to learn. Yeah. Good point. Another thing I've learned is that changing user behavior is near impossible. And so that was really an important insight for me. And what it manifested to me as a rule is no new stuff. So what does that mean? We started this thing out by building a USB token. And this USB token was an NFC reader that you would stick in your computer. And what I liked about the idea at the time was it was kind of cool. The user ritual for payment is, it meant I could tap my credit card on my computer at home and pay, and I wouldn't have to type anything into the browser. It's easier for me. It's more secure for the merchant. Yep. What I learned about that experience, however, is that getting that token out of our shop and into the hands of the banks to take it as inventory, and then to get it in the hands of the user to take it, to give it to you to train you up, and then to get you actually to carry it around, was the dumbest thing I could ever try to do, because nobody was ever going to do it. I didn't realize it at the time, but what I learned from that is trying to get users to do new stuff is like really, really hard. Yeah. So you got to find a way to capitalize on things they're doing already. Yeah. And so maybe one last one. Yep. Is you got to get over your own genius. And so what I mean by that is often when people create an idea, they're so convinced it's revolutionary and the world's going to come to them because it's the best thing ever. Yeah. And the problem is you're sucking on your own exhaust fumes a little bit. Is that you lack distance from the idea to be critical. Yeah. And so, I as a mentor and a coach, I coach a lot of businesses, and invariably I ask people, so, what are the competitors to what you do? And the very naive answer I always get back is nobody does what we do. We're so unique. Nobody can do it. Exactly. And what that says is they're not being critical, and so that to me is a risk. There is always an alternative, no matter what you're talking about. Yep. Even for space travel, there's an alternative, which is adventure travel, right? Yep. You'd never think, well, you can't. There is no alternative to space travel. Yep. People who can't do space travel today are doing other crazy stuff like flying around the world in balloons, right? There's always an alternative, and so if you can't identify the alternative, that means you don't know what you're really doing. Yeah. Because users are doing something instead, even if it's putting up with it. Yeah, drinking your own Kool-Aid a bit too much there. Yeah. So anyway, that's some of the things I've learned in this space. Yeah, no, that's good, and it relates to one of my previous guests who was an entrepreneur, and he used this term cognitive dissonance, and I think it was the same thing. Basically, get over yourself is the layperson's way to say that. Like you may, it may really excite you, but like you say, until you get it out there and test it, yeah. You're not really going to know for sure. Well, listen, this has been really good, Andre. Good, I enjoyed it. Good catching up, and maybe we can do this again sometime. But before we go, somebody heard something that you said and was intrigued or wants to learn more about the type of work that you're doing, any contact or follow information that you're comfortable sharing with the audience, and keep in mind that these are people in Finland and Germany, a worldwide audience, so sure.
anything you're
I'm very
sharing?
passionate about this topic, and I will talk to anybody who will listen, because I tend to talk about it a lot. So I love the discussion, and so anybody wants to reach out and learn more, for sure. My easy way to get me is on LinkedIn. So it's Andre Boysen, and Boysen spelled like boysenberry, Boysen. And my email address is A as in Apple, M as in Michael, Boysen@gmail.com.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, Andre. Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Well, thanks so much.
Okay. Take care.
Ciao.
Today's podcast was brought to you by Under 10 Consulting. Get your products teams up to speed quickly with the latest methods and a proven process tailored to your organization. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ready Product Radio, part of the Ready PDM network. This is when most podcasters ask you to leave a review on iTunes if you like the show. My only request is if you found the show entertaining, inspiring, or informative, please share it with a colleague or friend who may feel the same way. Also, note that the views expressed in this episode do not necessarily reflect my views or the views of the Ready PDM network. If you want yourself or your product to be ready, then keep your eyes on your markets, your ears to your customers, your mind on their experiences, both good and bad, and finally, keep your hearts in your products. Until next time, thank you for listening. You can contact us on Twitter at Ready Product Radio. That's RDYPRODUCTRADIO. And on the web at www.readyproductradio.com.
Gee, mate, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.